Good afternoon and very warm welcome to everyone on behalf of INHAF to the webinar entitled Homelessness and the Right to the City in India. We are living in times of uncertainties. Most severe disruption happened in India, in our cities since independence due to this pandemic. Indian cities are a paradox of enormous scale and magnitude. 48 crore urban population contribute to 65% of the GDP of our country. The pandemic has laid bare the life and livelihood conflicts through return migration of billions from cities to villages. And again, we see the people coming back to the cities, even if the conditions have not changed much. Cities in India, as in other places of global south, are the engines of economic growth, centers of innovation, exchange of ideas, and hotspots of climate change, pollution, water stress, flooding, and lack of basic amenities for millions of slum dwellers and informal settlements. We, on behalf of INHAF and over 50 urban professionals and civil society organizations, activists, and researchers, have been hosting a series of 40 webinars during this month of from June to December 2020 on the theme of rethinking Indian cities with active participation of more than 150 experts, specialists, and activists sharing their perspectives on a number of themes related to urbanization and cities. The series is an integral part of and feeds into the initiative launched by INHAF last year called City URI, Citizens Urban Initiative. It is a multi-level and multidisciplinary societal dialogue spearheaded by India's leading urban professionals, thinkers, practitioners, and organizations to work on a blueprint for productive, inclusive, resilient, and human urban habitat. The webinars have been seen as opening that much needed societal dialogue on how we handle the urbanization process and develop cities so that they remain the engines of economic growth, but also become socially just, environmentally sustainable, and culturally vibrant place to live and work with. The reason for selecting this time is that people are ready to adjust to their virtual presence, are in a reflective frame of mind, even if temporarily, and prepared to invest energy and time in things they would otherwise not be doing in normal times, and are receptive to new ideas and a kind of situation what we are calling as earlier we are calling as next new normal, now we are calling as next normal. The webinar series started in June 2020. We have already completed 34 webinars on different themes. The 35th is this one taking place today on the theme homelessness and the right to city in India. Without taking any further time, I like to hand over the screen to our very eminent panelists and our anchor and the initiator of conversation, Mrs. Shibani Chaudhary, who will conduct the conversation with very eminent panel of speakers. Mrs. Chaudhary is the Executive Director of Housing and Land Rights Network, who are for a very long time working on the issue of housing, land rights, and livelihood and right to the city for the large section of marginalized people in our cities. And Housing and Land Rights Network is also a co-organizer of this webinar. We are indeed pleased to uh, mm, tell this. I would now request and invite Mrs. Chaudhary to kindly initiate the conversation. Mrs. Chaudhary, please.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from today. And as Mr. Roy mentioned, my name is Shivani, and I work with the Housing and Land Rights Network in Delhi. And it is really our privilege to co organize this webinar with INHAF. And I would like to congratulate INHAF on completing 35 webinars in this series and for inviting us today to discuss an extremely important issue. Today is actually the eve of Human Rights Day. So tomorrow marks 72 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is celebrated globally as Human Rights Day. And today we have gathered to discuss the human rights of one of the most marginalized and neglected constituencies in the world, not just in India. People living without housing suffer very severe human rights violations. So I am grateful that we have got this space to discuss their issues, to try to bring to you some of their problems, but also to think about how we reimagine our cities, our spaces, both in urban and rural areas, to address this crisis of homelessness. It's not just an urban problem because we have seen even with the pandemic how linked urban and rural issues are, and to deal with them separately is a huge flaw of policy makers, but also of civil society. So we need to look at linkages between urban and rural, not treat them as distinct binaries, because the people that live in cities often come from rural areas. But we're also talking about intergenerational homelessness of people who, for years, for generations, are not able to afford a place of their own, a home of their own in a city. And I think this reflects a very serious failure on the part of policymakers, of the government. And we really need to say enough is enough because everybody needs a home. And I think the pandemic, we didn't really need the pandemic, but the pandemic has really heightened the importance of home for life. You know, we are constantly being told, stay at home to stay safe. What about people who don't have a home? What about people who've never had their own home? How do they stay safe? And safety is not just about protection from a coronavirus. Safety is about protection from violence, protection from ill health for various reasons. So this is something that we have been working on for many years of trying to draw the importance of housing as a human right. And you know, it's very difficult for any of us to imagine what would it be like to spend even one night out on the street without a home. We so much take for granted the ability to be home. How does a child grow normally? How does a child study and feel safe if he or she does not have a home? How do women stay safe and protect themselves from violence if they do not have a home? How does one recover from an illness when they are out on the streets living in precarious conditions? How do you sleep even one night peacefully without a bed, you know, without your own room, without a space to call home? How do you access sanitation? So there are so many issues linked and so many violations that arise from not having a home. And I think, you know, the term homeless is used so casually, but it's really hard to put oneself in the place of somebody who is living in the public gaze all the time. There is not a moment of privacy for people who are homeless and living on the streets. These are people who do not even have the most elementary form of shelter. And the most fundamental human right to life is violated by not having adequate housing. And homeless people are those who experience much higher morbidity and mortality rates, not just from pandemics, but in general. Studies around the world have shown how homeless people die from communicable diseases, and most of these deaths are preventable. But who is responsible for these deaths? There's never any accountability. A study by the Center for Equity Studies actually found that, you know, a person who lives without housing, a person who is homeless, is 5 times more likely to die daily than someone with a home. So these are very shocking statistics, but I think people have become so immune to seeing homelessness, and it's accepted as a part of urban life. It's accepted. Rural homelessness is so much more concealed, that it's not even discussed. So today we will be talking more about urban homelessness since we're talking about rethinking cities, but we do have to address the issue of rural homelessness, which is so linked and which the pandemic and the migrant workers crisis has really brought to the forefront. So this reflects so many systemic failures of the state, looking at issues of poverty and fundamentally the failure to provide affordable, low-cost housing. So people living in these precarious conditions, under railway, on railway platforms, under flyovers, on footpaths and pavements, they are living in these conditions because they cannot even afford, a small tenement in what we call, a juggi or a basti or an informal settlement. And there is no policy to bring them into the fold of housing schemes. As we know, the National Urban Livelihoods Mission only talks about shelters. A shelter is the first step on a housing continuum. A shelter is not a solution to homelessness. So today, I think we will hear from very eminent speakers who will discuss challenges in different cities across India, as well as provide national perspectives. And then we will try to focus less on the problem, but more on developing radical shifts in state policy and coming up with solutions to end homelessness. And I think it's also not just about the issue of housing, but it's about the issue of health, about the issue of livelihood, about the issue of education, protection from violence, as I mentioned. But fundamentally, a home is also linked to identity. So you get excluded from so many schemes because you do not have an address. So you do not get counted for any kind of government documentation, which then automatically excludes you from available social welfare schemes. So I think the issue of identity is very much a challenge that we are trying to address, as well as fundamentally the right to live with dignity. And I think that is what is violated daily for any person living in homelessness. Now, the homeless population is not homogeneous. So we have, intersectional discrimination. Women face gender-based violence and are among the worst affected. Children grow up with a lot of problems of violence, sexual abuse, trafficking, lack of education. Malnourishment is very high. But we do not have disaggregated data on homelessness in India. We do not know what is the number of children living in street situations. What are the number of homeless women? So how do we develop adequate policy response? Now, the census data of 2011 says, we have about 935,000 people in homelessness in urban areas and about 835,000 in rural areas. But, the Supreme Court commissioners have estimated that 1% of the urban population, or 4 million people in India, are living in homelessness in cities. That's a huge number. Where is the policy response to address their housing needs? So I think today these are some of the issues that we will discuss, and we have put the framework of the right to the city. I see in the chat that the definition has already been provided. The right to the city emerged from social movements in Latin America, which brought together a demand of a bundle of rights. It includes the right to adequate housing, to livelihood, to a clean and healthy environment. But it's fundamentally about everybody in a city or a rural area having the right to participate in decision-making of the city, as well as to benefit from the city, its spaces, its services. And I think today we're going to discuss about how to achieve the right to the city for persons living in homelessness and try and ensure their right to dignity. So we have three very eminent panelists, and I do want to mention that one of our speakers, Ms. Amreen Farooq, is not able to be with us on account of a family emergency. So we will miss her, but we have three speakers with very diverse and extensive experience who will make this webinar worth your time, I am sure. So I would like to now hand over the floor to Muhammad Tariq, and I will introduce him briefly. Tariq is an Ashoka Fellow and is the founding director of Koshish, which is a field action project of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He has worked for many years on issues of urban poverty, homelessness, and destitution. And in particular, his experience and expertise has been on trying to work to decriminalize destitution in India, especially what goes on under so-called beggary laws. Currently, he is a member of the Supreme Court appointed Monitoring Committee for the Shelters for Urban Homeless. It's a great honor to have Tariq here. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule, Tariq. And before I hand over the floor to Tariq, I would just like to mention that we will have three speakers present in two rounds. So I have requested them in the first round to share the three major challenges faced by persons living in homelessness, and based on their experience, what the recommendations would be. So thank you very much again for this opportunity to host this webinar, and Tariq, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Thank you, for organizing this. I think it's a very, very important conversation that we are having today. When it comes to homeless people, we all know, they are the most, probably the most visible parts of our cities, but yet they remain the most invisible. So we see them, but we don't see them. Uh, and that's largely, how the state's response can also be kind of estimated. Uh, you know, uh, uh, if one has to say how, Shivani, you spoke about identity. I think that's where the entire the policy formulation is actually kind of weakening the entire kind of services required for homeless people. The identity itself, you for most these people don't exist. And after years of, we know, for several years, advocacy has been going on around the issues of homelessness and housing. I think uh, the position that the government should have, what it should be, the state's response in terms of homelessness should be around justice and equality, I would say. And equality, including ability to access services, ability to negotiate my entitlements, ability to for me to be able to participate in any policy process that is going to impact my life. Unfortunately, the position or the response that the state has is either that of charity, is either that of charity, that's the most positive that you can see, or worse still, it is criminalizing people. So in the recent years, we have seen Supreme Court coming in. There has been order about, all cities, urban towns requiring to have shelters. But what I see is that, if we, and I've been seeing how, what is the extent of implementation of the order, all the shelter policy. uh, at best, as you also said, at best it is about providing shelter. I think the reason for that status is this entire response is coming from the perspective of providing something as a charity. It is not seen as, as a commitment that state has towards its citizens. It's not seen as the from the framework of justice. And so we have shelters, badly run shelters. You'll have states being reluctant to provide shelters. You'll have hearing after hearing, but uh, they'll come up with some reason, and Supreme Court would also be okay with going on the next hearing, really not holding states accountable for, if one looks at the number of lives lost every year, it should be a matter of utmost priority. But unfortunately, that is not. What my work also comes from is the other part of this response. Charity is still, you're doing something, but the other responses comes from the framework of from the context of criminalizing homelessness. So one is, we are not able to provide for people, their rights are being violated. On the other end, because of the failure of the state systems, we, instead of providing support mechanism, instead of providing for an enabling environment that will help them get out of destitution, what we do is we criminalize them. We hold them responsible for the situation that they are in. So if an elderly person who has been abandoned or a mentally ill person who is on the streets, instead of providing relief for that person, what we do is we have beggary laws in more than 20 states in the country, where more or less the clauses are the same. Police goes, they go on, people are rounded up, they are being arrested, produced in the court, and then sent into these institutions. These special, these are no less than a prison, but they are not called prisons. These are special kind of custodial institutions which are set up under the beggary laws. And once the person is gone there, I'll just mention two three clauses from the law, like, so person can be detained from 1 year to 10 years, and homeless. If a person is without any visible means of subsistence, then the person can be arrested and can be assumed to be a beggar, and beggary is an offense, so can be arrested. Now, if I'm actually without any visible means of sustenance, do I require state's help, or or should I be actually be punished for that, to be in that situation? It provides for, there is no need for any warrant, there is no need for any evidence. So if by look if I look, if in my appearance, if it appear, if the officer on duty feels that I might be living out of seeking alms, I can be arrested. Now just imagine the homeless people who are living on the streets, daily wage workers. How many of those people would actually fall under this law? And in all big cities, Delhi, for some time now, the degree has been decriminalized, so the arrest is not happening. But otherwise, in all major cities, Bombay, it continues. People are arrested on a daily basis and brought to these homes. Now, what happens when this process is going on? One is, of course, the dignity is compromised. That is level one. The the assumption that is being made here is that all these people are illegal occupants. Now, when I'm an illegal occupant, my state would have responsibilities against me. It will have a duty against me. Whereas, if I were a legitimate citizen, then the state will have duty towards me. And this very difference, results in homeless people at best getting some odd or moderate shelter, and the understanding of the shelter is, or the understanding of homelessness is so limited, that we just assume that the absence of shelter is all that is, all that is that needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, when people, uh, uh, as we all know, with homeless people, with the houseless population, the situation is extremely vulnerable. Streets are very hostile. Abuse is very common, and worst is those abuses are not reported. Even if the person wants to report, many of those abuses are seen as a pattern or the lifestyle of people, and systems don't really entertain those complaints. Then now that itself is bad, but when the same person is arrested and kept inside an institution, the situation, the vulnerability multiplies many folds. Now, what is happening there? There is clear normalization of violence. There's clear normalization of violence. There's also acceptance of humiliation. So when I'm in custody, when I'm being picked up by police and I'm sent to some custodial home, and I'm forced to live there, uh, I'm I'm actually seeing things happening to me. So whatever is being given to me, even if I'm getting food, the staff there, the approach that people have is, okay, something is being done, something is being given. Now that entire process, in terms of what it does to my mind as a homeless person, is gradually, eventually, I start feeling that, okay, I'm getting some help. I'm something is being, so there is an acceptance of relief coming my way. There's acceptance of whatever little comes for me, along with humiliation. There's an acceptance, and that's very dangerous. You spoke about homeless person, wondering about sleeping with peace. I want to share a small experience for our work. uh, we saw in those of you who have worked with custodial institutions would know how everything is timed in an custodial institution. So even if, even for sleep, for you can sleep at a particular time, you can eat at a particular time, you can sit in a particular way. If not, you'll be checked. So there will be caretakers, there will be constables who will be constantly telling you what to do when. We saw that there were people who had spent years in these institutions, and even if somebody wants to sleep, say at 3 o'clock, they'll not be allowed to sleep. Now with this, we did a small experiment, which of course now has become a very integral intervention that we have at Koshish. We start something called MySpace. This basically meant that women can come to this. We negotiated with the Department of Women and Child Development, got this space where we said none of the rules of the institution will be applicable here. And we said, okay, anybody can come here and you do whatever you feel like doing. Most people, most women who would come to this place, in the initial few days, all that they would do is they'll come and sleep. Something as basic as sleep, they were even deprived of that. Or here and sleep because they knew that if they're sleeping, no one would hit them. Knowing that when you are sleeping, no one will hit you, or no one will abuse you. Such a small thing, but people are deprived even of that also. So of course, and when they start coming to this MySpace, we had not started with that, with that clarity that time. But later on, it turned out that people coming to this space, their recovery was much faster. Many of these women were affected with mental health issues, and they were on medication. Their recovery was much faster. And I think what one understood from that was that if the fear is removed, if that uh, fear of being abused, fear of being assaulted, somebody coming up and beating you, if that is being removed, and if that is being replaced with some compassion, somebody actually asking you, are you doing okay? I think that's a very powerful way of doing it, and that is what tells me that it is actually possible to address homelessness. It's not that it's not that it cannot be done. Only thing is, we really need to see these people as somebody, as the lives that are important, that needs to be saved. People say every year we see, now winters are coming, we'll see headlines saying so many people dying of cold. Nobody dies of cold. Cold is same for everyone. Heat waves is same for everyone. People are dying of absence of protection. If you don't have a shelter, you die. If you don't have warm clothing, you die. So, but what we do is, by this language is very, this language is actually very strategic. I feel, because this language puts the onus on the person rather than putting it on the state, putting them on the state for creating enough services and for creating adequate services. By choosing this language, what we do is we put the responsibility on the person. And that is where, if so, it's like it's same way, the way we very often, for a very long time, development sector was also caught in that, where we kept talking about, for example, with mental illness, we kept talking about awareness, sensitization. Okay, if I have to take my mother to a psychiatric facility, I don't have any stigma around it. I don't have any problem in acknowledging that I have mental health issue, but I need to have a place where I can go. I need to have a facility that I'll have access to, that would be that would be available, that I'll have access to, and that would what something that would be affordable for me. But by saying that, you create awareness about it, there is a lot of stigma is there, but that by using that language, we somewhere we let the government kind of go away from their what they need to do. Now this uh, when the people are in the institution, and with this, uske baad mein we'll talk about solutions that we can have. When people are moved into the institutions, one extreme thing that happens to them is, of course, they are dependent on others. So somebody is controlling. No matter how good an institution is, I mean, even if you have good officers, violence is lesser, but people are still at risk. And we have seen what happens behind those institutions. Nobody knows. And uh, and a homeless person's ability to report is extremely limited. Imagine if I know that, I'm in a custody where some guards are there, security officers are there. If I say anything, I'm there only. I'm at their mercy. So I'll not be able to say anything. And what mechanism we have for checking? Even the NULM scheme for the shelters has a provision for social audit, for example. But I have not heard of any state doing it. The shelters that have been created on the orders of the Supreme Court, that scheme has a provision for social audit, but nobody has done it. So nobody is actually going and asking people what is happening to them, what is being done to them, these people. Of course, with this kind of environment and the kind of abuses that any homeless person goes on while on the streets, it is extremely difficult for that person to challenge, for that person to trust people when someone goes and in that one meeting, if somebody is going and person is not saying anything, then we say that these people are not, they are not sharing or they're not talking, and then nothing comes out of that process. I think uh, the fact that state governments have managed to continue with the beggary law, where imagine no warrant required for arresting a person, and my family can be detained for a similar period of the sentence that I am being given. uh, it's not that I've been talking a lot of people generally assume that these are ashrams sort of places where elderly person is being taken for some sort of relief. They are not. They're taken there for punishment. What would be more ironical than an elderly person who has been abandoned by his or her family is now being is being arrested, taken to the court, and then sentenced and sent as a punishment to these homes. So am I the victim, or am I am I an offender who is being sent as a punishment? And then what happens? You go and make these people work. So for example, Maharashtra has a lot of agricultural land in many of the beggars homes that they have, and people work there, and you know what? They are being paid some 5 rupees a month, and that is being called rehabilitation. Now one can imagine. So what is the perspective that we have as state? What is the merit that we see in these people being there? Unfortunately, the crux lies there. We actually have no value for people. We actually have no concern whether these people live or die. And that is where, so because I feel that since there are a lot of organizations advocating for shelters. So yes, states have now come to an acceptance that yes, they'll have to provide for shelters. But the approach is still not about, I need to save my person. I need to save this person. I need to restore dignity. I have to ensure a dignified life for everyone. Unless we have that kind of perspective with the government, I think it is going to be very, very difficult. Having a law alone or having a policy alone will not be solving this. Of course, we can
Sorry, Kalaka.
go to the, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So I think I'll close there. I'll end. I stop for now. I think it's the I'll take it back to basic human emotions where we need to think of having, treating people with empathy. And this COVID has actually shown us that uh, uh, how humiliating relief processes can be. The entire design of relief interventions is such where we require people to seek help. you know and that can be very, very disturbing for many people, and all of us have seen how certain relief operations were conducted. I think we, instead of creating memories, whatever hardship people faced, I think physical hardship people are used to. It's not that other than the COVID times, homeless people have an easy life. They go through so much of abuse on a daily basis that they are really, really hardened in that sense. They're very strong. Their determination to survive is very, very strong. But I think what has shattered them this time is this feeling of having been abandoned. This what will disturb them for many years to come would be these memories of complete apathy, where it's like it's not the I don't think that physical hardship people are going to remember, because they'll of course be doing what they have been doing. But this uh, this memories of helplessness, you know, even for a single meal they had to struggle, single meal they had to stand in queues for hours, and in the process they got humiliated, they were ill treated, badly treated, even with the so-called best of processes. I think that's gonna be very very difficult memory to overcome with. I'll stop here now.
Thank you so much, Tariq. And sorry, I had to ask you to stop, but we have.
Oh, did you? I didn't actually, I
Oh,
couldn't hear that.
I was okay. Then it's fine. Yeah, we just have to manage the time a bit, and it's always a tough job because the issue, as you heard from Tariq, is so serious, and it's also a very difficult. These conversations are very difficult to have because it speaks about a failure of humanity at so many levels. I mean, the most basic being compassion, but as Tariq very strongly pointed out, that the attitude of the state, and I think this line of declaring or treating people as illegal is very serious. And how we shift that legality, illegality, and then totally the state is absolved of responsibility. And unless we have a very strong framework of justice and equality, which the Constitution of India does guarantee everybody living in the country, unfortunately we're not seeing that being implemented for the most marginalized group of homeless people. And also, I think the issue of language that you raised is so important, and I hope we will have time to discuss that, because it's very easy to, as you said, shift accountability, but also to dismiss and put the blame on people. So this whole notion of them being dirty or unclean or not fitting your aesthetic of the city, which is why they're the first ones who suffer violations. So, for example, if there's a Commonwealth Games, you don't want them to be seen. It's not seen as a failure of the government, but it's seen as a blot on your beautiful city. And so they're immediately arrested, put on trains, sent away, and face just horrific violations. So thank you for raising very, very crucial issues of criminalization and charity. And I think what even the special rapporteur on housing has been stressing in their work over the years is that people living in homelessness are rights holders, and unless we treat them as that and ensure that they get equal rights of the constitution and of every law that exists. But then here we have laws that are very problematic, the laws that criminalize poverty. And I just want to quickly mention that last week the African Court of Human Rights actually struck down all anti-vagrancy laws in the continent of Africa, which is a huge step. So maybe it's been decriminalized in a few states, but I think we need that across the country to stop penalizing people for being poor. I'm now going to request Vanessa Peter to speak, and I'll introduce Vanessa. Vanessa works in Tamil Nadu, where she has been, devoting her time and energy to fighting for the rights of people living in poverty and destitution. Her work has focused on issues of housing rights related to resettlement, rehabilitation, homelessness, and evictions. She's been associated with the Office of the Advisor to the Supreme Court and has been monitoring the government's scheme of shelters for the urban homeless. She has played a very active role in working with the Tamil Nadu government to improve services and facilities for persons living in homelessness. Currently, she's also the member of the Supreme Court appointed state level community in Tamil Nadu. And in 2013, she founded the Information and Resource Center for Deprived Urban Communities that works to build linkages between policymakers and the urban poor, but also is working for justice for deprived communities. And Vanessa has been a long-time partner of Housing and Land Rights Network, and so I'm really happy to have you here, Vanessa. So thank you.
So I'll try to be as short as possible so that we can have a lot of scope for discussion. So before I start, one of the things that what we face in Tamil Nadu is that recently when we had done a survey with the urban homeless here, a 60-year-old elderly person said, how it is, how he defines his life of homeless. He says just in a sentence in Tamil, which means Nalu Ani Oru Kodi, which means that my existence is limited to just 4 nails and a sheet. So that's how I've been living here for 60 years. So starting on that note, one of those specific socio-demographic profile of the homeless in Tamil Nadu, especially in the major cities of Chennai, Coimbatore, is that there are over 60 to 80% of the urban homeless are residing as families for over generations, which means they've been residing in the streets and pavements for nearly 60 to 70 years. So this is one of the socio-demographic trend of the urban homeless in the Tamil Nadu. And our surveys that we have taken up, enumerations that we have taken up in almost 11 cities of Tamil Nadu reveals that over 99% of the urban homeless in Chennai are belong to scheduled castes. So that and most of them have migrated because of the, most of them have migrated from the rural areas because of either because of evictions, social discriminations, and even communal issues. So these are some of the reasons which they've pointed out. So some of the issues that I would like to flag off is one, we have seen that among the homeless, though everybody is vulnerable, there are people with multiple vulnerabilities, especially the women, children, the elderly, trans persons, as well as the other sexual minorities and persons with disabilities too. So we have seen in our engagement with the urban homeless, we have seen that there is a huge problem when it comes to domestic violence. There's been sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, trafficking has been one of the issues, and especially when it comes to children, there are two trends that we have seen. One is increased child marriage, because parents feel that it is safer to get their children in the streets to get married, so that they are much safer. So eventually what happens is the number of girl children who are being forced into child marriage is very high. And we've also seen higher dropout rates. Many of the children have never been going to school, and predominantly, even if the children are going to school, most of them drop out at the age of 15. So that's something that we have noticed. And our interactions with the urban homeless families across the state reveals that there is specific discrimination in schools and Anganwadi centers, and hence the parents are also reluctant to send the children to schools and Anganwadi centers. And we've also seen that there has been no specific approach adopted by the government of Tamil Nadu to address these vulnerabilities of the extremely marginalized communities, groups within the urban homeless. So the only solution that one seems to have for the entire issue of urban homeless is the shelters, without understanding the fact, as Shivani was saying, the homeless are heterogeneous communities, and we need specific interventions for the specific groups of communities based on their vulnerabilities. However, that has not taken off, especially in Tamil Nadu. So some of the key issues that I wanted to flag off is one, there is no legal safeguards. So the existing policies does not recognize the homeless. To give one specific example, the recently approved Tamil Nadu Housing and Habitat Policy recognizes only night shelter for the urban homeless. Second, the only approach that the government has towards tackling the issue of urban homeless is an institution-based approach. We are not focusing on, access to entitlements. We're not focusing on access to employment opportunities and access to permanent, adequate housing. So this is still is a bigger problem. And the third one is the existing inadequacies of the Shelter for Urban Homeless scheme in the state. So there is a lot of problems which comes from the quality of the shelters. Secondly, in terms of the fund disbursement for the non-government organizations who are implementing or operationalizing the shelters, to entire problem of how the government sees these shelters. So because of the kind of push from the Supreme Court, they're just setting up shelters, but it is just a program by itself. There's not much of convergence or coordination between the different departments happening to ensure that there is quality services provided in these shelters. So and the fourth problem that we have seen is that the right to adequate housing for the homeless is not recognized at all, and especially where families are reluctant to go to family shelters because there has not been a single successful family shelter model being operationalized in the state, and people are demanding for housing. But however, what happens is when we have launched the right to adequate housing campaign in Chennai, one of the things that we found was it was always passing on the buck. So when we write a letter to the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, they'll say, if the Greater Chennai Corporation enumerates and gives us a list, then we will provide housing. And then you go to Greater Chennai Corporation, they say it's not a mandate to, provide housing. So this is the confusion. And finally, if you manage to convince the bureaucracy and say these people need to be provided housing, they say, who will pay the beneficiaries cost of 10%? How is it that these communities can afford it? So it is always, somebody will try to pass on the buck, or finally, end up criminalizing communities, saying, they cannot pay. They've already got houses elsewhere. Even if we give them houses, they will sell it and come back to the street. So there's a whole lot of stigma and criminalization attached to these communities, and the government is not willing to even consider that they have the right to adequate housing. So this is one of the biggest challenges. Which comes to my next point, is the overarching apathy of the state, of the officials, as well as the court of law in the cities in Tamil Nadu. So one thing is, as Tariq has also mentioned, the homeless are construed to be illegal and encroachers. So what happens is, one of the biggest problems that they face, which violates the right to city, is forced evictions. So we have seen the homeless being evicted under various projects like the Metro Rail, as well as the road expansion projects. And they provided housing somewhere in 30-40 kilometers away from their place of residence. And they're forcefully evicted, and they have no other option but to accept these houses. And forced evictions and being pushed outside the city is one of the major issues. Secondly, the bigger issue that these communities face is police harassment and police excesses. So we've had multiple cases of false cases being filed against them, and even during some of the critical rescue process, we do not get any support from the police in terms of even getting a police memo to ensure that they get referred to a nearest shelter. And finally, the public, the general public. So as Tariq was also mentioning about stigma and criminalization, this is one of the biggest issues that we face. So we've got multiple umpteen number of petitions which are being signed by various residents welfare association and other groups, urging the urban local body to evict the homeless from the places, because as Shivani mentioned, they are seen to be, dirty, they are construed to be unclean. So this is one of the biggest problems that we face. So based on most of these complaints, the ULBs also end up evicting them. So we have had places where specifically under the smart city projects, the homeless have been evicted and asked to move out because they want the area to look, clean. So these are some of the problems that I thought I can just highlight here. And I thought it would be good to mention about the issues that the urban homeless face during the coronavirus pandemic. We've had instances where the Greater Chennai Corporation had actually street quarantined the homeless families. So when there were either somebody who was tested positive of coronavirus in the locality or in the street, or when one of the homeless themselves was tested positive, they end up putting all these tin sheets and closing the sides of the road, which simply meant people did not have access to toilet, people did not have access to water or food. So they were just, all these tin sheets were made, used to close the roads. So it took us a lot of pressure to, go to the government and tell them, no, they cannot be doing that. How is it that people can, fend for themselves if, they kind of close down the entire roads with no access to basically water and toilets and food. So these were street quarantines were happening across. And finally, after a pressure, they opened up community halls for these families who were residing there. And it went to an extent that there were areas where the disinfectants were sprayed on the urban homeless. And especially for the elder, there was one thing that we have seen in Chennai and Madurai was the increasing number of elderly homeless, especially during the pandemic lockdown. And the biggest thing was the ambulances or even the Greater Chennai Corporation's rescue team were hesitant to rescue them without testing them for COVID. So it was, by the time a person who was extremely ill was actually admitted into the hospital, it took about, say, more than 24 hours, they were waiting for the COVID test. So this was some of the issues that these urban homeless face here. And unfortunately, none of the relief packages that government of Tamil Nadu announced when it reached the homeless, mainly because all the relief packages announced were, they said if you have a ration card, then you will be entitled to the state's relief packages. So if you're part of any of the welfare boards which is established by the state, then you will be able to access the relief packages. But however, over 70% of them do not have a ration card, and most of them, I think only less than 1% have access to the labor welfare boards. So in that case, what happened was most of them did not get any of the basic relief materials from the state, and wherever there were a pressure from the civil society to ensure that the urban homeless got access to a shelter in the nearest location, what happened was in the relief camps, the moment some of the migrants have vacated from the relief camps, the urban homeless were asked to move out. And it went to an extent where the corporation, the urban local body, ended up booking a big van, asked all the homeless people to get into the van, and they went and asked them to get down in some of the peripheral areas of the city. So they just basically wanted the homeless out of the city during the pandemic time. And we have seen cases of starvation, and we've seen cases where extremely ill urban homeless were without food and water out in the streets during the pandemic because of this kind of an issue. So I just like to conclude with some of the way forward that we were just thinking in mind. One was, there is definitely need to work together collectively to ensure legal safeguards at the national as well as the state level. Then I think we need to focus on right to adequate housing. We need to, there is definitely a need for campaigning for the government to recognize the housing rights of the communities. We need legal support for the urban homeless, especially in cases where there has been cases of false cases have been filed on the homeless families. There has been cases of domestic violence and child abuse, but unfortunately the police does not accept their complaints. So there is a need for a legal support, and there is definitely a need for having specific interventions for the the homeless with multiple vulnerabilities like women, children, the elderly, trans persons, persons with disabilities. So I end my speech with this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that very enlightening presentation, sharing, the reality of homelessness in Tamil Nadu, but I think also, highlighting the intersectional vulnerabilities that people face. And I'm also glad you spoke about trans persons who also face a lot of discrimination, both in accessing housing, but also in accessing shelters, because we do not have specific shelters for them. And I think, thanks for also giving your recommendations. Also, the point you mentioned about forced evictions being one of the reasons for rising homelessness. We're seeing this across India, where people are evicted without resettlement, which is a direct cause of homelessness, but also that people who are homeless are being evicted, and I think this kind of structural violence against people living in homelessness and poverty is something that is not addressed or not even discussed. So it's also structural discrimination. And I think, I know in your work, you have also been working with Dalits and other scheduled caste communities that form a disproportionate number of urban homeless populations in many parts of the country. And I know Tamil Nadu is one of them. So I think, again, these intersections of caste, of gender, of disability, of sexual identity, of geography, of income, of religion do come together and create multiple vulnerabilities for persons living in homelessness. So thank you very much for that presentation. I would now like to request Mr. Ashok Pandey. Ashok ji will speak in Hindi, and my colleague Ayushman will translate his presentation for you in English. Ashok Pandey is a field coordinator with the Housing and Land Rights Network. He manages the project on homelessness for the organization. He is also a person who has been living in homelessness for many years, not anymore, but he has a lived reality of what it's like to be homeless on the streets of Delhi. And I think that has really helped develop his sensitivity, but also increase the sensitivity of the organization in terms of strategies and outreach. And that's why his work is so important in advocating for the human rights of people living in homelessness. And he has been working now for over 20 years on this issue. And so, Ashok ji, आप कृपया अपनी बात रखेंगे. बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद, आप आज हमारे साथ हैं.
सभी को जिंदाबाद, नमस्कार, सलाम. सभी का स्वागत भी है। साथ में मुझे अपनी बात रखने के लिए अवसर मिला, उसके लिए भी धन्यवाद। आज हम लोग इस वेबिनार के माध्यम से भी चर्चा कर रहे हैं आजादी के 70 साल बाद भी कि बेघर लोगों के सामने का समाधान निकाला जाए। आज भी हम वर्ग के जो लोग हैं उनके लिए कहीं न कहीं सरकार कुछ न कुछ जरूर की है, लेकिन ये आवासहीन जो बेघर समुदाय है इसके लिए सरकार पूरी तरह से उदासीन रही है। और इसीलिए आज भी हम जीरो से ही चर्चा कर रहे हैं कि कैसे कैसे पहला स्टेप क्या होगा, दूसरा क्या होगा, तीसरा क्या होगा। तो ये बहुत दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि हम लोग आज भी इसी पे चर्चा कर रहे हैं। बेघर लोगों के सामने जो सबसे बड़ी चुनौती है इस समय, वो है उनके रहने को लेकर के, उनके घर को लेकर के, आवास को लेकर के। क्योंकि लोग रोजगार की तलाश में गांव से शहरों की तरफ पलायन करते हैं। खासकर मैं दिल्ली की बात करूंगा क्योंकि दिल्ली में मैं रहता भी हूँ, काम भी करता हूँ। और यहाँ मैं स्ट्रीट पे रहने का अनुभव जो है, फुटपाथ पे रहने का अनुभव, वो भी मेरे पास एक अच्छा खासा है। तो लोग रोजगार की तलाश में शहरों की तरफ आते हैं और जब उनको पर्याप्त अवसर नहीं मिलता है शहरों में, क्योंकि शहर की ज़रूरतों को अपने श्रम से पूरा करते हैं, लेकिन शहर जब उनकी ज़रूरतों को पूरा नहीं करता तो मजबूरी में उन्हें फुटपाथ पे आवासहीन का जीवन जो है जीने के लिए मजबूर होना पड़ता है। तो सबसे बड़ी समस्या जो है वो आवास की है, किफ़ायती आवास की है, जिसके लिए हम सब लोग संघर्षरत भी हैं। कानून में भी, संविधान में भी ये है कि प्रत्येक नागरिक को एक स्तरीय जीवन जीने का अधिकार हासिल है, जिसमें भोजन, कपड़े, घर, चिकित्सा देखभाल व जरूरी सामाजिक सेवाएं उसमें शामिल हैं। इसके साथ बेरोजगारी, बीमारी, विकलांगता, विधवा होने पर व वृद्धावस्था में अथवा किसी ऐसी विषम परिस्थिति में भी सुरक्षा का अधिकार जो है वो प्रदत्त है, हासिल है। कानूनी रूप से संविधान में हर एक इंसान को, जो इस देश का रहवासी है, नागरिक है, प्रत्येक महिला, पुरुष, युवा व बच्चे को सुरक्षित घर हासिल करने का, घर में रहने का, बनाने का वो अधिकार है कि उन्हें घर होना चाहिए। वो उनका मानव अधिकार है कि एक इंसान को रहने के लिए कम से कम घर तो बहुत जरूरी है, ताकि वो अपने समुदाय में, अपने समाज में सम्मान से, शांति से, सुरक्षा से और निजता के साथ अपनी जिंदगी को जी सके। लेकिन बेघर लोगों के सामने इसका पूर्णतया अभाव है। आज भी दिल्ली के अंदर में 20 साल पहले ये अभियान शुरू हुआ और ये इस सोच के साथ में आश्रय की मांग की गई, क्योंकि उस समय आश्रय भी नहीं था बेघर लोगों के लिए, कि पहला स्टेप होगा, पहला पड़ाव होगा घर का आश्रय, क्योंकि फुटपाथ से आश्रय में आएंगे तो उसके बाद फिर अगला स्टेप जो है वो घर का होगा। पिछले काफी समय से हम लोग इस पे प्रयास कर रहे हैं कि सरकार घर की तरफ एक कदम बढ़ाए, लेकिन आज अगर आश्रय भी दिल्ली में है तो वो सरकार की संवेदनशीलता नहीं बल्कि दबाव में, चाहे वो न्यायालय का दखल हो या फिर सामाजिक संगठनों का दबाव हो, जिसके चलते ये आज इतने आश्रय गृह जो है वो दिल्ली में बन पाए हैं। लेकिन उस आश्रय गृह में भी जो एक नागरिक को रहने के लिए सुविधाएं मिलनी चाहिए वो नहीं मिलती, क्योंकि एक इंसान को रहने के लिए उसको शौच जानना है या फिर उसे खाना बनाना है, वो सारी सुविधाएं एक जगह पे होनी चाहिए जिसे हम घर का रूप मान सकते हैं, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है। आज भी हम कहाँ रहेंगे, हम क्या खाएंगे, हम कब उठेंगे, कब सोएंगे, ये तय कौन करता है? सरकार तय करती है। यानी हमारी जो खुद की आज़ादी है वो भी हमारे पास सुरक्षित नहीं है। तो ये बहुत बहुत दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि आज भी हम आवास के लिए, आवास के पहले कदम के लिए संघर्ष कर रहे हैं और लड़ रहे हैं। दूसरा जो सबसे बड़ी चुनौती है होमलेस लोगों के सामने, जो समस्या है वो रोजगार की है। जैसा कि मैंने शुरुआत में ही कहा कि रोजगार की तलाश में ही लोग गांव से शहर की तरफ पलायन करते हैं। और मजदूरों के लिए जो रजिस्टर्ड मजदूर हैं, जो पंजीकृत मजदूर हैं, उनके लिए मनरेगा जैसी स्कीमें लागू हैं, लेकिन बेघर लोगों के लिए इस तरह की कोई, क्योंकि वो पंजीकृत ही नहीं है, उनके काम को ही मान्यता नहीं मिलती है। जिन कामों को वो करते हैं वो काम सरकार उसकी मान्यता ही नहीं देती है, तो इसलिए उनको काम का भी अधिकार उस तरह से हासिल नहीं है जैसा कि उन्हें मिलना चाहिए। लेकिन लोग अपनी आजीविका के लिए अपने हिसाब से कामों का चयन करते हैं, और काम के बाद जब उन्हें रहने की कोई जगह नहीं होती है तो फुटपाथ को तलाश कर लेते हैं। मजबूरी में फुटपाथ पे उन्हें रहना पड़ता है, और इसका मुख्य कारण जो है उनके पास उनकी तरफ सरकार की जो संवेदनहीनता है वो इसलिए है क्योंकि वो वोटर नहीं है। तीसरा पॉइंट भी हमारा यही है कि उन्हें मत का अधिकार हासिल होना चाहिए, क्योंकि हर इंसान को भारत में, इस देश में जो 18 साल से ऊपर के हैं, हर किसी को सरकार बनाने का अधिकार संवैधानिक रूप से मिला हुआ है। लेकिन मतदान करने के लिए मतदाता पहचान पत्र का होना जरूरी है, और मतदाता पहचान पत्र हासिल करने के लिए मतदाता पंजीकरण उनका होना चाहिए। दिल्ली के अंदर में काफी प्रयासों के बाद आज लगभग 30,000 लोग मतदान का अधिकार हासिल कर पाए हैं, उनका मतदाता पंजीकरण हो पाया है काफी प्रयासों के बाद। ये संख्या, ये परसेंटेज अगर हम देखें तो 8 से 10% बामुश्किल होगी। तो कुल मिलाकर के बेघर लोगों की जो स्थिति है वो वही है जो आज के 70 साल बाद थी। बदलाव सिर्फ इतना हुआ है, फर्क सिर्फ इतना पड़ा है कि काफी प्रयासों के बाद में जिस तरह से संघर्ष चल रहा है, इन संघर्षों के कारण और न्यायालय का जो दबाव रहा है उसके कारण, दखल रहा है उसके कारण, आज सरकार बेघर लोगों के लिए खासकर सर्दियों में चैतन्य हो जाती है। और इसका एक और बड़ा कारण यह है कि मीडिया भी इस मुद्दे को सिर्फ सर्दियों में ही उठाती है। सर्दी खत्म होने के बाद से ना इनके लिए स्वास्थ्य की कोई सुविधा है, ना ही रहने की कोई व्यवस्था है। अभी जैसे पिछले वक्ताओं ने, साथियों ने कहा कि कोरोना के समय में तालाबंदी के बाद, जिस समय सरकार द्वारा ये घोषित किया गया तालाबंदी का, तो इस वर्ग को पूरी तरह से नजरअंदाज कर दिया गया। काफी हो हल्ला के बाद इनके लिए सिर्फ 2 वक्त का भोजन, वो खाने लायक था नहीं था वो एक अलग विषय है, उसके अलावा ना तो इनकी सुरक्षा का ध्यान रखा गया। सरकारी निर्देश था कि लोग अपने घरों में रहें, लेकिन ये नहीं बताया गया कि लाखों की संख्या में फुटपाथ पर रहने वाले बेघर लोग कौन से घर में रहेंगे जब उनके पास घर ही नहीं है। और जो आश्रय की संख्या, आश्रय गृह की संख्या है, वो इतनी सीमित है कि वो मुश्किल से सामान्य समय में 15 से 16 हजार लोगों के रहने की व्यवस्था उसमें है। तो कोरोना के समय में वो संख्या आधी से भी कम हो जाती है, यानी 95% लोग बाहर, जिनके पास आश्रय गृह भी नहीं है, घर की तो बात छोड़ दीजिए। तो इस तरह की स्थितियों के साथ लोग संघर्ष करने के लिए मजबूर हैं। और सरकार से हम लोगों ने कई बार सरकार को सुझाव दिया, और अभी भी हम लोग उस पर प्रयासरत हैं कि सरकार बेघर लोगों के लिए एक आवास नीति बनाए, उनको आवास नीति में शामिल करे, और आश्रय के बाद जो उनका पहला, दूसरा, तीसरा स्टेप हो, उसमें आवास के संदर्भ में जो परिवार हैं, महिलाएं हैं, उनको रेंटल वाउचर की व्यवस्था करे जब तक आवास की व्यवस्था नहीं होती है, हॉस्टल का प्रावधान करे जब तक आवास की व्यवस्था नहीं होती है, और आवास के लिए आवास नीति बनाए। इसकी डिमांड हम लोग जो है वो बराबर करते रहे हैं। क्योंकि उपयुक्त आवास उनका संवैधानिक अधिकार है, मानव अधिकार है, उन्हें मिलना चाहिए। 300 दिन के रोजगार की गारंटी मनरेगा के तर्ज पे उन्हें मिलनी चाहिए। अगर उन्हें काम नहीं मिलता है तो बेरोजगारी भत्ता मिलना चाहिए। और सभी लोगों को जो शहर में आवासहीनता की जिंदगी जी रहे हैं, उन्हें मत देने का, सरकार चुनने का पूरा अधिकार मिलना चाहिए। मैं चाहूंगा कि साथी इसको ट्रांसलेट कर दें, काफी लंबा हो गया है।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद अशोक जी, बहुत महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे आपने रखे हैं। So I would like to request Ayushman, who is a legal researcher at the Housing and Land Rights Network, to please translate what Ashok ji said into English. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shivani. Hope I'm audible to everyone. Okay, so basically what Ashok ji highlighted in his statement is that he has been seeing the situation in Delhi for quite some time now. He's been living here. And he is highlighting that it's unfortunate that we are starting from the ground zero when we talk about homelessness. Even after so many years of independence, there hasn't been much progress on this issue. And homeless people, they contribute their labor to the city, and they are instrumental in the functioning of the cities. But in return from the cities, they do not get the support that they need from the government and from the state authorities. Now, the law and the Constitution of India, it guarantees every citizen the equal right to an adequate standard of living. And that includes the access to food, clothes, adequate housing, healthcare facilities, and other basic necessities and essential services. And moreover, for those who are unemployed and suffering from illnesses, living with disability, or they are older persons, they especially have the right to state support and social security. And the state owes them that responsibility to take care of them in that state. So basically, every individual has the right to adequate housing so that they can live with peace, dignity, privacy, and security. But for the people living in homelessness, the lack of affordable, adequate housing is a major challenge. Now, Ashok ji highlighted that in Delhi, when 20 years ago, this movement for shelter for homeless people started, because that was the first step that they could think of. Shelter was the first step in this process. And from that time, through various civil movements, they have been trying to, urge the government to move beyond shelters towards housing. If there are shelters in Delhi today, it's not because the government has a very sympathetic view of homeless people who are living in homelessness, but it's because of the pressure from public groups, from the constant advocacy that people have been doing, and also because of the interventions of the courts and the legal system. The shelters overall anywhere in India, they do not have proper facilities to be even considered a home, because and everything that people living in homelessness is decided by the government, where they'll sleep, what time they will wake up. It's all very regulated, and they do not exercise the same levels of freedom that every one of us do. Now, there are certain challenges which Ashok ji highlighted, which are very important, and which people living in homelessness face. The first is, as I already said, the lack of affordable housing. And the second issue is lack of livelihood opportunities and employment guarantee. Now, people move to cities, they migrate to cities from villages, mostly in search of employment. But the work that the homeless people do is not recognized by the state. Just as for example, in the case of Manrega, it's the work is recognized by the government. But in terms of the work that the people living in homelessness do, it's not recognized by the government. And hence, in a way, they are denied their right to work. And when people living in homelessness, they do not find work, it affects their access to housing, food, and health. And consequently, they are forced to live on the streets. Now, the third issue which Ashok ji highlighted was the right to vote. Now, every citizen has the right to vote and elect the government of their choice. But to exercise this right, voter registration is imperative. But a large number of homeless people living in homelessness, they are left out of the system and they're unable to avail the benefits of government schemes and policies also because they're not registered as voters. In Delhi, after a lot of efforts, around 30,000 people have been registered as voters, and these were people who have been living in homelessness. But this is just a small percentage of the actual population of homeless people in Delhi. So without a voter card, people living in homelessness are deprived of the basic right to vote. Now it's winter time here in Delhi, and only in the winter the problem and the issues of homelessness become slightly visible in the media. After the winter is over, these problems are not discussed anymore, and the government also, starts neglecting these issues. During the lockdown, the experience of people living in homelessness was very unfortunate. They were largely neglected by the governments, and after this issue was highlighted constantly, the government did, announce certain measures. They provided free meals, but there are so many challenges which have occurred because of this pandemic. One is that the normal capacity of shelters itself is not very adequate to accommodate all the people living in homelessness. But after this pandemic, this number has further reduced because of requirements to maintain physical distancing. Now, there were certain suggestions for the government which Ashokji presented. The first one was to enact a policy on homelessness, which can, first of all, recognize this issue and also, prepare a roadmap on how to address this. The second was to include people who are living in homelessness in state schemes for housing, and move to the next step beyond shelters to housing. And this can be done by providing rental vouchers under the rental housing scheme, providing hostels for working men and women, and ensuring that everyone living in homelessness has access to adequate housing. The third suggestion which Ashokji stated was that, like Manrega, which guarantees a certain amount of work and employment, even people living in homelessness should be guaranteed at least 300 days of work. Or if the government is unable to do so, they should be provided some unemployment benefits, because work and livelihood is the major reason why people move to cities. And the fourth suggestion that Ashokji pointed out was that uh, ensuring that every person who is living in homelessness is registered as a voter so that they can exercise their legal right to vote. And at the same time, they are included in the government schemes and policies, and they can avail the benefits which the government announces. Yeah, so that was the gist of what Ashokji highlighted today.
Thank you very much, Ayushman, for that very comprehensive translation. And I think very important issues have come to light from Ashokji's presentation, especially related to the indivisibility of human rights, the need for an indivisibility of human rights approach, because we're seeing how the right to work, the right to health, the right to food, the right to adequate housing are violated systematically for persons living in homelessness. And that's why at Housing and Land Rights Network, we have been really advocating very strongly for a human rights approach to addressing homelessness, and particularly, trying to guarantee the right to adequate housing, which Vanessa also mentioned. And at Housing and Land Rights Network, we have a campaign on, calling for adequate housing for persons living in homelessness. Now, I think we are running out of time, so we will move to the questions. I see on the chat box so far only 3 questions. So I'll take the first one, which has been addressed to me, and I think that the other ones are comments. So the first question from Paroj Banerjee is talking about, when homeless persons are given alternative housing, they don't often take it, and how is home constructed for them? So I think in India, at least from our experience, the government has not provided housing for persons living in homelessness. It's only in Chennai where Vanessa mentioned, if there is a development project or some kind of state project, that if you are homeless, then maybe you are given a tenement in an alternative site, which is way out of the city and it's inadequate. But we don't have any evidence of people leaving those homes and coming back into the city. So, I mean, they are accepting it, even though it is very inadequate, because it's better than living out on the street and, facing so many forms of violence and vulnerabilities. So this issue so far, there hasn't been in the policy framework. The only solution is shelters, and that's why we're asking for adequate housing. Now in Delhi, there has been a very strong movement, very strong rights-based organizations, including a collective that has come together to address the issue. And just last month, the Delhi government announced that they would construct housing for persons living in homelessness. Now, this is a very welcome announcement, and it's the first that we know of in the country. In Kerala, there has been a scheme to try to ensure that homeless people are given housing under their life mission. So a few states, but I think overall there has not been a focus on housing. And what we are advocating for really is a continuum of housing options. So for example, in all our work with people living in homelessness, there are some who are single workers, and they want hostels, where they can have their own room, but they can have shared common spaces. And families are asking for rental housing. They cannot live in a hostel, they cannot live in a shelter. There's no privacy there. So they are asking for subsidized social rental housing. So the government needs to develop creative schemes to address the various needs of persons living in homelessness. Older persons, need to be in a home with medical aid and other assistance. People living with chemical dependencies need different kinds of homes. We need homes for women who are escaping domestic violence and find themselves on the streets because they have nowhere to turn to. Or we need different kinds of homes for transgender persons who face very severe levels of discrimination. So I hope that answers your question. The second question was from Ray Chandavarkar, who's talking about citizenship being the basis for human rights and the rights to the city. But I think in our work, we have actually not focused on citizenship. We're focusing on all residents of a city or any space. And I think the government's duty and responsibility is to ensure that everybody living within its jurisdiction is provided, dignity and housing and access to all services that the city offers. The framework of human rights is also not based on citizenship. It's based on just by sheer value of being a human being, you are entitled to the entire spectrum of human rights. So they apply to not just legal citizens of a country, but also to refugees, displaced persons, and even stateless people have access to all human rights under international law. So I think that's the framework in which the right to the city is ensconced. I think there are some comments about our, we're talking about Chandigarh, a rehabilitation scheme, or that Renu Singhal has mentioned. Sultana from Bangladesh is talking about how people are rendered homeless due to fire and, whether there is a policy for them. I think this is a very important issue because we don't really have a policy. It depends on the state, and the disaster management acts are not really addressing fire. And actually at Housing and Land Rights Network, we have documented number of people in India being rendered homeless every year because of fires. And it's very ad hoc. Sometimes they will be given compensation at best. And mostly there is no resettlement done. Now, I would like to turn the floor to the panelists if they would like to respond to any of these questions. Maybe we can give everybody 2 minutes to respond. I don't think there are any other questions that I have left out. So who would like to go first? Maybe 2 minutes per panelist, and then I would give it to Mr. Kirti Shah to close the session. And I had also thought that the panelists have a lot of experience, so if they could also share maybe one strategy that has been most effective in addressing homelessness in their areas of work, or whether they would like to respond to any of the comments or questions in the chat box. Yeah, so Tariq, would you like to have the floor?
Yeah, from our work, I think what has worked in spite of everything, I think the process or the approach that we follow, the systems approach, where you are consistently engaging with the system, that is something that has worked for us in getting these schemes or the programs. For example, we set up a pilot intervention in Bihar, where we worked closely with the state government and developed a scheme where, for the first time in the country, homeless people were the rehabilitation was carried out without criminalizing them, and we kept on our engagement with the central government also, and there was a special committee formed eventually by the central government to draft a draft for the legislation on persons in destitution. It didn't go to, like, of course, the draft was prepared, it went up till pre-legislative consultation, but it didn't move beyond that. It's still under the process. But based on the Bihar work, what happened with the central government was that they very recently, central government came up with a scheme for rehabilitation of people in beggary and destitution, and that scheme has been launched in 10 cities across the country. So I feel that also responding to the questions or the discussion comments that were there in the chat box, I think it begins with recognizing these people as citizens. Unless we have that, it is going to be always be based on, if you get a good officer, you get a good scheme. And even if technically homeless people are linked with or are linked with the schemes, I think the broader issue there is the total allocation of money for social protection measures programs that are there. Even now, you leave the homeless people outside. Even other than that, the number of people who require special assistance from the state and the number of people who can be covered, there's a huge gap in that. And if we really want homeless people also to be added, and I think we also need to look at the budgetary allocations, and advocacy has to be on greater allocations for social protection schemes and programs. But for me, what has worked is consistently engaging with the systems. There are issues, difficulties, but ultimately, when it comes to the most vulnerable people, I think we have to get them on board and consistently keep working with them. So that would be a strategy point for me.
Okay, thank you, Tariq. Vanessa?
Yeah, there are two major
Just 2 minutes,
strategies that we are. Yeah, definitely. The strategies that we adopt and has been successful is one, engagement with the government, because we have been doing a lot of researches and we've been presenting it to the government officers, and as a result of which there has been certain things that has worked out. For example, Chennai at least has started a shelter specifically for the trans persons with disability, the elders. So they've recognized it, and also specifically for women with disability. So we were able to kind of convince the government as far as shelters are concerned. Secondly, another outcome of the engagement with government is we were able to convince 2 urban local bodies to take up shelter audits, social audits for shelters. So we have had one in Chennai and one also in Uti. So we've been able to do that. As far as the housing is concerned, we are the only strategy that we believe is in empowering the families or the homeless families to start demanding. And for the first time, the government has actually responded to us after we have sent a petition to the National Commission for the Scheduled Caste. So when we had sent a petition, we were able to get some good responses, at least a response from the government. And now we are empowering the communities to start making use of all the grievance redressal day in all the departments. So a team of leaders from the communities will go and approach the officers during the grievance redress day, which is there in the offices, at least prior to COVID. So these are some of the strategies that we've used. And of course, the media strategy also works very well in highlighting the issue and at least getting us an immediate, response from the government.
थैंक यू वनेसा। अशोक जी, आप 2 मिनट में कुछ कहना चाहेंगे जो स्ट्रेटेजी आपको लगता है सबसे सफल रहा है लोगों के अधिकार के लिए लड़ने में?
जैसे कि मैं 1-2 चीज़ें साझा करना चाहूँगा यहाँ पे। एक तो ये है कि हम पिछले 1 साल से अधिक समय से आवास अधिकार अभियान के तहत एक अभियान चला रहे हैं, जहां पे एक लगभग 20,000 लोगों तक पहुंच हमने बना पाई है। और उसका एक फायदा ये रहा है कि लोगों ने अपनी आवाज को पोस्ट कार्ड के माध्यम से, चित्रकला के माध्यम से, सिग्नेचर के माध्यम से सरकार तक पहुंचाने का काम किया है। 1000 से ऊपर पोस्ट कार्ड बेघर लोगों ने खुद लिख करके और पोस्ट किया है। तो एक तो ये है कि समुदाय के साथ में ये सिलसिला जो है जारी रहना चाहिए इस तरह का। दूसरा एक चीज और मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि दिल्ली के संदर्भ में कि दिल्ली में NULM की जो पूरी गाइडलाइन है उसको आश्रय के साथ में उसको बिल्कुल जोड़ना चाहिए, उनको लागू करना चाहिए, क्योंकि उसको लागू कर देने के बाद से अब पहला स्टेप में भी जो लोगों को सुविधाएं नहीं मिल पा रही हैं, काफी कुछ उससे जो है वो लाभ होगा। तीसरी चीज जो हम लोगों ने किया है पिछले सालों में कि एक ग्रुप बेघर का खड़ा किया है, जो वॉइस ऑफ होमलेस, बेघरों की आवाज करके एक ग्रुप है, जिसमें लगभग 250 से अधिक सदस्य हैं, सक्रिय सदस्य हैं। उन्होंने बीच में जो रोजगार के बीच में ठेकेदारी को पैसा जाता था उसको खत्म करा, डायरेक्ट मालिक से और एक रिश्ता बनाया है, और वो लोग सफल हैं कुछ हद तक। तीसरा महिलाओं के साथ में महिलाओं के संदर्भ में यही है कि हम लोगों को प्रयास करना चाहिए, क्योंकि जिस तरह से महिलाओं के आश्रय को लेकर, आश्रय में निजता का ख्याल नहीं रखा गया है, वो बहुत जरूरी चीज है। आजकल लड़कियां, महिलाएं घरों में रहने वाली भी सुरक्षित नहीं है, तो उनकी सुरक्षा को भी नजरअंदाज किया गया है। खुले में नहाना है, खुले में कपड़े धोना है, और खुले में शौच जाना है, कपड़े बदलने हैं, बच्चों को दूध पिलाना है। तो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जिस पे हम लोगों को आगे काम करने की जरूरत है। बाकी जो हाउसिंग को लेकर के मेरा सुझाव था, मेरे ओपनिंग कमेंट में मैंने उसको रख दिया था। तो ये कुछ चीजें हैं जिस पे हम लोगों को आगे और करने की जरूरत है।
Shukriya, Ashokji. So Ashokji mentioned 3 strategies that we have adopted. One is, as I mentioned, the campaign on adequate housing for persons living in homelessness. And through this campaign, which involves human rights education and consolidating demands of people, so giving them a platform to come together and share their demands with the government. Over 20,000 people have been reached in Delhi, and they have also submitted petitions. Postcard campaigns have been held to consolidate their demands for their right to adequate housing. They have also formed a collective of the youth known as Voice of Youth, where youth who have been homeless are now mobilizing others and spreading awareness on their rights and issues, as well as a campaign on the specific needs and vulnerabilities of women living in homelessness, because he mentioned the issue of privacy and violence is very serious for them, and also in these campaigns trying to reach out to the media. So I really want to thank the panelists for their interventions. We think there's a lot of time, but we never know how quickly time goes, because there's so much to discuss on this issue, and unfortunately, we have not been able to cover all the issues, but I think we have managed to raise some important questions and issues that need to be discussed at so many levels, but more importantly, need to be addressed. And I would really like to thank Mr. Kirti Shah and Hina Ahaf for this opportunity. I really hope that, as Vanessa also mentioned, the need to work collectively is very strong. This is an issue that covers the entire country, but also, we have partners in other countries that are struggling with homelessness, and tomorrow a global action on homelessness is being launched, and I can share more details with those who are interested. But the issue is really urgent. We cannot wait any longer to provide adequate housing for everyone. So thank you, and Mr. Kirti Shah, I'll give you the last word.
No, not the last word. Thank you very much, Shivani. A remarkable webinars, very educative, very touching in terms of the issues, and of course the struggle part. So thank you very much for organizing this. I must personally thank you, I think, deeply, because we have been working on organizing this now for about 4 months, and I think had a large number of problems and issues of people not being available, people being sick, etc. And even today, while we put the whole thing together, at least had one casualty, I think, couldn't come. So thank you very much for persisting. And thank you very much putting this together. It's been hugely educative. I must thank this remarkable panel, which brought on surface some of the deep issues, issues and things that we don't know enough about, and has been done very adequately. So thank you very much, Mohammad Tariq Saab. Thank you, Vanessa. You were here earlier and you put these things very passionately. अशोक साहब, आप हिंदी में बहुत ही अच्छा बोलते हैं और बहुत ही अच्छी बात बताई आपने. And Ayushman, I think, your translation was remarkable. I think, thank you very much. Sorry, Amrin, that we missed you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Sorry, Amreen, that you couldn't join us, and we miss you very badly, but we understand. I think special circumstances you are in, and I hope things are in shape there. And of course, I must thank my colleague Savnik Bhai for a very interesting introduction to the whole webinar series. As he pointed out, and let me reiterate it, that this entire series of, this was the 35th webinar, it is, all of them essentially are on one subject, which talks about rethinking Indian city. And when you start rethinking cities, issues and problems of people that we discussed today, homeless, are critically important. And if you're talking about inclusive city, if you're talking about just cities, if you're talking about compassionate cities, these are the people and their issues are the ones which need to be addressed right away and upfront. Let me take a few minutes and share one or two things which comes out of this. One is a very interesting story, very old story, Shivani, but something that brought me very near to this subject as early as 30 years ago. This was, I was working with National Commission on Urbanization that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had set up. And at that time, Calcutta, I think, Development Authority had started a unique survey of payment dwellers. There were all kind of figures which was floating around in terms of how many people were on the payment. They were talking about 3 lakh people. Someone was talking about, I think, 60,000 people. And therefore, the authorities decided to conduct a very interesting survey. And that survey that time was unique in the sense that survey started at 11 o'clock at night and will end at 5 o'clock more in the morning. Idea was to catch people while they were on the footpath. And I was invited to spend a week to observe and see what was happening. And I think, and so every day, I think, at 12 o'clock at night, we'll move out, with the surveyors and walk into the areas and see these things. Two things that struck me, I don't think even forgotten today, that every second person or every third person one met on the pavement was there in Calcutta, not for 2 weeks, not for 5 weeks. Some of them were there for years. And one of the stories that I came across and about which we have written about in the report of the commission is the story of Sita Devi. You won't believe me, this woman from Bihar came to Calcutta and lived on the pavement of Calcutta for 25 years. She had 2 children while she was there. She got them married. And I remember discussing this particular issue with one of the remarkable activists called Sudhendu Mukherjee, who was doing huge amount of work in slums and poor. And when we talked about this issue, what he said was remarkable. He said, Kirti, issue is not so much what is wrong with the planning. It's not so much what is wrong with, I think, our policies and programs. He said, issue is what has happened to us as a society. What has happened to us as neighbors? What has happened to us and as people who are keeping shop? Because that is what this lady was saying. And he said, therefore, it is not the question of right alone. And I'm pleased, Shivani, don't misunderstand me. I'm not, but I'm saying compassionate society is a very important part of new urbanization. We've got to understand these people. We've got to kind of see that they exist. They must register. Their rights and their conditions must touch us and move us. So it's not only a Sarkar problem, it's a wider societal problem, which is what I wanted to mention. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you was, and I think Shivani, you mentioned that while the numbers that government talks about is much smaller, maybe I think as much as 1% of the urban population live in this condition and situation. In that context, I just want to kind of give two statistics. One is, you know how many houses we are building under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana? 20 million. 20 million. And 11 million of them are about to be completed. And it appears that this is one program which will be done in time, which means 20 million houses will be built by 2022. Now, if you're building 20 million formal houses, are you not able to do anything about this 4 million people who are homeless? Second, even more interesting statistic, which would interest you and interest this panel and the people who are listening. I don't know whether you know, but the statistics of vacancy rate in our cities is as high as 12%. 12% of the houses which are built, which exist, are locked. What is very necessary is to find out, where are this? Is that the houses, which I think, investors buy and don't sell, and that is why they're empty? I personally feel a deeper insight into this probably would give us a better understanding of where and what kind of, where these houses are. And I think we should examine in terms of what could be done in the context of the homeless population. This is the second thing that I wanted to mention. Third thing that I wanted to mention, and I think it's something that may not go very well, but I do believe personally very much in the incrementality of solution when it comes to housing. We were a year ago, I think, as a part of a coalition we have done in Ahmedabad called Shisha, Citizens for Shelter and Homeless in Ahmedabad. We were doing study of the shelter homes. In Ahmedabad, there's something like 44. Two things that came to my mind was this, that whereas 10 shelters are needed, there's only one shelter available, that's in a very poor condition. And when you ask Sarkar this question, why are you not doing it? The municipality asked this, why are you not doing it? They said, issue is not money, issue is land. That we don't get land. What comes out very clearly is that even Sarkar's perception of the issue is this: you require a formal, pakka building in order to look after these people's need. Is it really necessary? And what I was saying in one of the meetings was this, that instead of talking about not being able to build 9 more shelter homes they require, if they were to advertise, I'm sure you'll find so many houses in corners of the city, even in slums, where people could be accommodated. And I don't think the payment dwellers would refuse them because they are in slums. At the moment, they have nothing. They would get to doing something. And I personally feel This is the problem a compassionate, a caring, a thinking city can solve almost right away. I personally believe that this kind of shelter resources exist in our cities. Question is to unearth them. Question is to find them. Question is to kind of apply our head and really kind of believe that this is a better solution than no solution. And I think, once they are in a reasonable, slum is not a great shelter, but a reasonable accommodation where at least water is available, where there's a public toilet, where it's not called illegal. You could start the process from there as well. So I thought, and I'll just mention this. I have a large number of things to say about incrementality and this whole fixation on formal housing. I don't think I'll go into this because it's already 6 o'clock in 10 minutes. Let me kind of do my last two things. One is to tell everyone who's here that our next webinar, which is 36th, takes place on 16th of December. And this is a very different kind of webinar compared to today. While here, that is on a macro issue, that's on resource mobilization for financing urban infrastructure. And so what are the kind of money you require? If you remember, the statistic that had come out earlier was this, that this country requires $640 billion in the next 20 years to look after its infrastructure need. And if you also know that under JNNURM, over a period of 7 to 10 years, we're only able to spend $13-14 billion. So there's a huge gap between what we need and the capacity we have. And we would have a remarkably talented and informed and knowledgeable panel discussing it. And it is being anchored by Madhu Pai, who works with World Resource Institution. So before ending, let me take this opportunity to thank my colleagues at Studio in Half. That is Radhika, Alika, Shimul, Dhwani, Nita, and other people who have been helping and have been making this initiative very successful. They're the ones who work behind the scene and they're making it possible. So with those words, I would end this webinar today. Thank you once again, Shivani ji. Thank you once again, the panel members. Thank you once again, Shaunik Shab, and all those who are present and listening to this very interesting discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Shivani ji. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you very much. It was very, very. Vanessa, sorry,
for this space.
I come next time in Chennai. I think I come very often. I think I got to come and see you. I promised last time. I don't even know when would I move, but I think when I do, I think I'll do that. And Ashok Saab, आपने बहुत ही अच्छी बात बताई. हाँ जी, बहुत ही अच्छा. कहाँ से हो आप? हिंदी इतना अच्छा बोलते हो भैया.
यूपी से सर.
अच्छा, हाँ, वो तो आपकी भाषा है, But you see, Shivani, I don't want to kind of get into that, but we're talking about not seeing the people. You just imagine what is happening in Delhi. I think about the farmers' protest.
Yeah.
There is no desire to see.
No. As you said, compassion is completely missing. I mean, there's no basic humanity left.
Absolutely.
I mean, if the people who feed the country can be treated like this, then, really what has happened to the state?
And you say
one thing is important also here, the kind of solidarity or the fellowship among the Punjabi society. That's also very, very.
It's
really
incredible.
Something I think most of the other societies are completely missing. The
Not
kind
only
of
that, I think
fellowship and solidarity.
I think
it's
Shivani,
also very important.
The webinar is still being recorded. It's still live, right?
Yes.
Shivani,
Yes,
Should we close it for the participants?
Shivani, I think I was listening to a very interesting narrative in terms of what is the supply chain which is working for these people. It's just an incredible story. How they are running kitchens for 30,000, 40,000 people.
Yes, amazing. The
How
sacrifice and the service, spirit of service is so
how
strong.
free vegetable and food comes, how I think water comes, how milk comes. The whole supply chain is informally active, and they say we are ready for 6 months. Don't worry.
And so many women, you know, and there's no
So many women,
facilities
yeah,
for
yeah,
sanitation for them. There are no toilets, but they're still sacrificing so much. And it's very cold here.
It's very cold. I'm saying this was very cold, and but it's see in the context of the struggle that you are involved in. This is a hugely, I think, encouraging, I think, stories.
But
That-
one point, Kitty, I was just thinking that is it possible because the Punjab this society is still very agriculture based. That's why probably not moved to much towards corporate industrialization, which probably other urbanization dominated state has happened. That's why they could retain that fellowship. I was just thinking yesterday when I saw the langar or the kind of big community kitchen and organizing the fuel and all these things.
yeah,
Thinking that question coming to me that whether it has also relation with the kind of economic base and the kind of social relations, the kind of family structure, which probably could have conserved this cherished character. So that's
no,
probably,
that's I think there is a huge amount of societal resources of this nature. But more than anything, Shivani, I just was giving an example. I think someone
You
in
have
terms
to
of
leave
what.
soon.
Yeah. Okay. We will some other
So
time. Okay.
the webinar has ended. So we need to end for the participants.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Shivani. Thank you,
Okay,
Ashok
thank
Saab.
you so much.
Thank you, Savnik Bhai, staying over. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be in touch, Shivani.
Yes. Thank you
there
so much, sir. All the
There
best.
are things to be taken forward. I think we'll work on that. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
need. All
Thank
right. Thank you very much
Thank
to all the participants and
Thank you.
our speakers today. So all the best to
Thank you.
everyone.
Sure.